So in 2007, 4 years after my marriage, with a 2-year-old son and a cancer survivor mother-in-law, I decided to go in for a full-time PhD from IIT Kharagpur as a regular student. Everybody around me thought it was a very preposterous rather than ambitious decision because I was doing it after a gap of about half a decade. 17 years later, with more than a decade at IIT Patna, if there is one thing I am very proud of and never regret is my decision to do this PhD. This, ladies and gentlemen, is my story of resilience. Hello everyone, I'm Priyanka Tripathi and I teach English and Gender Studies at the Indian Institute of Technology, Patna. I also happen to be the co-executive editor of Journal of International Women's Studies, which promotes women's issues. Today, I will be talking about something which I have tentatively titled Turning Setbacks into Comebacks, the Art of Resilience. Being part of an institute which is considered to be a new IIT, but a legacy in the making, I was soon to realize that the journey of resilience is not just individual-centric. It is also community-oriented. So when in 2015 we shifted to this campus, which was in its construction phase, I realized that the institute was just growing along with all of us, and we had to pace up if we had to grow. Therefore, the journey of IIT Patna's resilience coincided with the journey of all of us, the students, faculty, and the institute put together who were part of it. We can say then, in that case, resilience is the ability to come back, to bounce back in our very difficult times. There is a very particular line which I can talk about in a book called A Start from Life, which is written by Anita Bruckner, and she says, Dr. Weiss at 40 knew that her life had been ruined by literature. People like me who find their very being molded by literature find treasure in those ruins. Come, let us begin from here. Usually, it's said that we become what we focus on. Maya Angelou's words powerfully coincide with this sentiment, and she writes, "You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may tread me in the very dirt, but like dust, I'll rise." This essentially captures the sentiment of resilience present in all of us. If we take the examples from literature, we will come across several writers who have faced tremendous amount of failures before they became big, they became so-called successful. Let us take the classic example of George Orwell. His particular book, which is called Down and Out in Paris and London, it is considered to be one of the most resilient novels written in the history of English literature. When this book was published, George Orwell also became the replica of what we term as resilient authors. But his resilience lies in the story in which he was struggling to publish his first book. T.S. Eliot was the editor of Faber and Faber, and he said, when he looked at his book project, that it was nice but not good enough to be published. Few years later, like Swastika said, cut to, we know him as the biggest, or perhaps one of the biggest writers of that century. Another writer that I can talk about, particularly you might have heard of him, Stephen King, the author of novels like It and Shining. His first novel, Carrie, was rejected as many as 30 times. 30 times, ladies and gentlemen, and he still went back and got it published in 1973, 1974, and today we know him as a very, very famous horror novelist. We also know about Anne Frank. So the book that she published is entirely about her experience. It's a diary basically written, which is her experience during with the Nazis in Amsterdam. The book is published posthumously. And when it came out, it became one of the significant write-ups, so to say, of the Holocaust. In the context of India, if we take, for example, Sudha Murthy is, I think, a very classic case. First, she broke the stereotype regarding engineering. She went on to study engineering when many girls would not opt for that. And then she ventured into writing. And if you read her, if you ever happen to read her, you will find that her voice was very unique in Indian English writing. There is another writer who I should talk about is Sujata Bhatt. Now, when Sujata Bhatt started writing, she had a medical condition in which her mobility was impacted. Now, in such a situation, when writing is not just a professional battle, but also becomes a personal battle, it becomes very difficult to craft your stories, but she just went on. I can go on endlessly in literature, but you see, if I take up 10 stories or 100, ultimately the point that I am wanting to make here is that these authors did not give up. They rewrote, restructured, reattempted until and unless they have found their way into publishing their work. Publishing at their own terms and conditions, publishing what they wanted to do. Just like all of you, for example, at some point of time, all of you decided that I'm going to be part of a very big institution in our country. In India, it is no less than a miracle if you get into one of the bigger institutions, government institutions, so to say. But you decided and worked hard, tirelessly towards achieving your dreams. And then, this day, you and I are here because we dreamt of it, worked towards it, without maybe taking a pause, but not stopping. I also talked about the community-based resilience. And in my opinion, IITs, which represent as a kind of a microcosmic representation of India as a nation, which is very diverse in terms of language, in terms of regions, in terms of culture, in terms of clothing, in terms of culinary, whatnot. We are very diverse. So diverse that at the same time you can call it its positive side, but at the same time it also leads to certain vulnerabilities. So in the context of India, in the context of IIT, what do? We try to address these diversities. And if we find small fissures here and there, we make sure to address it. There are 3 examples that come to my mind right away. If I take IITs, for example, of representing the nation, the preparatory seats that we offer at all IITs, a classic case of how inclusivity is promoted. The supernumerary seats, what an amazing idea, what an amazing policy to address the gender gap. And then the third I can talk about are various initiatives in IIT Delhi. There is Indradhanush. We have Unmukt at IIT Kanpur. We have Sathi in IIT Bombay. All these initiatives talk about inclusivity of the gender spectrum. These are, I think, very new initiatives in India. I don't think there are many institutes that are doing that. So IITs definitely hold that kind of position where they can talk about their resilience in terms of bringing inclusivity within their range and addressing the diversity. When I talk about the aspect of community-driven scope in terms of resilience, we cannot take away the fact that how society also conjures resilience. I mean, it's not like one size fits all concept. It is customized for every individual, depending on what culture one follows and what is the social context you have come from. Imagine a situation in which there is a young bride who decides to sing and faces opposition from the family. Instead of keeping quiet and succumbing to the pressure, she goes on to voice her voice literally. There is another example of a woman who has spinal, or rather a girl who has spinal tumor. And then, instead of succumbing to that, she goes on to take up sports, to become one of the champions of advocating rights for people who are disabled. Let's talk about a dancer who, when loses her limb in an accident, decides to go ahead and practice with the prosthetics. Now, just in case, if I tell you that all these women that I talk about, or all these situations that I talk about, are not imaginary situations. They are real, and you know them. The singer is none other than Padma Vibhushan Sharda Sinha. We are in the state of Bihar. There is no Chhat Puja which is complete without the songs of Sharda Sinha. Then Sudha Chandran, the dancer is Sudha Chandran. There was an entire film, Nache Mayuri, on her. And the para-athlete is none other than Deepa Malik, to whose credit is the first gold medal of Paralympics in 2016. Amazing stories. But they are not just stories. At all point of time, these people made sure that they are talked about. They share their stories. Because when you share these stories of resilience, they have the ability to create a ripple effect. And in this ripple effect, their journey is not alone. All of us join them because they motivate, inspire, and all this, which looks like a very theoretical idea, translates into action. The story of resilience is incomplete without one name, because in India, cinema is, yesterday I read cinema is forever. I was going to say cinema is God. All of us sitting in this auditorium at least will have one film that has inspired us, one film that we have seen back to back, or probably more than one film that we have gone on to see multiple times, and still every time at every age we see, we find new meanings of it. The story of Bachchan, Amitabh Bachchan, when he came on this Indian celluloid, you will find that his baritone voice became a major hurdle because it was not falling to the convention of what you can call the archetype of Hindi film hero. He did not give up. His conviction into his performance made him, what he is today. In 1973, there was a film which released, a film called Janzeer, And that established him as an angry young man. What did he do? He carved an entirely new niche for new kind of hero in Indian cinema. He was one of the iconoclastic actors to set new benchmarks, to set new roles, to set new design patterns in which Hindi cinema was going to explore itself. Clearly, there are many, many stories that we can talk about resilience. But when I was thinking about this particular capacity, it was not just the actors, not just the big people whom we know now, they were in mind.